I didn't have a Black Widow shirt. I got a Punisher shirt. They're both Marvel. Black Widow is finally brought to us by director Cate Shortland and stars Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, Rachel Weisz, and David Harbour. So this is the first MCU movie to come out since Spider-Man Far From Home, and that was a whopping 2 years ago. Now this movie was initially slated to come out more than a year ago in May of 2020, but because of, shit going on in the world, things got delayed until now. So here it is finally. Black Widow gets her long-awaited solo film after she's already died in the main continuity of the series. And that unto itself does present some problems with the film, but we'll get to that in a few. The story here is okay, I guess. I mean, it's fine. It's more of a stopgap between Captain America Civil War and Infinity War. We get to see what Black Widow was up to while she was exiled between those two films. And through that, we also get some backstory to her character from back in the day before she was an Avenger. We meet her family that she had back then, and we also see her reconnect with an old enemy. The movie is a lot like Captain America the Winter Soldier in the way that it's made. In that way that it's a lot less about superheroes and it's about ground level heroes. Yes, there's a couple of super soldier types here or there, and there are some enhanced beings in this film, but for the most part, these aren't superheroes. They don't have like magical powers or anything like that. This is a bit more grounded within the world of the MCU. That is to say, while people aren't flying around and they don't have magical powers, they can still jump off buildings and land, and they're okay. Now, I had heard going into this movie that it was a lot more about Florence Pugh's character and setting her up as the next Black Widow. That Scarlett Johansson's character kinda took a back seat, and I do have to disagree there. I didn't really get that vibe. Yes, they do a bit of setup for her character, and she's definitely gonna show up in the MCU in the future. And while I do definitely have some issues with this movie, that's not one of them. I never felt like this wasn't Black Widow's movie. Now, it does center a fair amount on her and her family, but I always felt like at the end of the day, it was still her film. Now, whether it's the film that I think she deserves or not, that's a different story. Our story is there, and it is just enough to get us from scene to scene, but it's just not very interesting. Now, about that family, I gotta say that this is probably the best part of the film. This colorful set of characters were really fun to watch and learn about, and the performances we got from Harbour, Weisz, Pugh, and Johansson together were fantastic. They really did seem like they had a lot of history together. You believe in this hodgepodge family that they put together. Unfortunately, though, when you take the family and put them in situations to actually do things, that's when things get a little dicey. David Harbour's character in particular, the film kind of sets him up to have his big moment at some point, but we never really get that. He's supposed to have been some big badass back in the day, and we get the idea that at some point he's gonna harness that power again and come back. But it never really happens. He just kind of comes across as a doofus the whole time. The vast majority of the jokes in the movie are at his expense. And I didn't mind that part so much, but he never really had that redeeming moment where he showed how cool of a character he could be. He's just kind of a bumbling idiot the vast majority of the time, and I felt like that was really wasted potential. Something else that was wasted potential that should come as no surprise to longtime MCU fans is the villain of this movie. Our villain that we are presented with the vast majority of the movie is Taskmaster. You've seen him in the promotional material, you've heard of him, this isn't like giving anything away. And the character's design and the idea behind the character is pretty neat. He can essentially mimic any fighting style or really anything that he sees. So as one of the characters in the film says, fighting him is like fighting a mirror. The problem is, that's about as far as the character goes. The movie does not do shit else with this character. It's a really neat looking character that has a pretty cool power, and that's it. Which ultimately leaves us with a pretty boring, bland villain once again. Thanos or Loki, this guy is not. Now, there is a part of the movie that I guess the movie tries, if you will, at least half-assedly to give the character some backstory, but it really falls flat, and chances are that, honestly, if you were even interested enough to think about the situation, you would have already figured it out. But honestly, the character is so boring and bland that you probably didn't even think about it, and when the big reveal happens, you're kind of like, Oh, okay. Another problem with this movie is that it just came out entirely too late. It should have come out before Infinity War. Now, I don't know if that would have necessarily made the movie that much better, but it definitely wouldn't have hurt. But in thinking about it, even if it had come out earlier, all the issues with the movie would still be there. Also, the special effects here, for an MCU movie at least, are a little bit lacking here or there. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say any of them are absolute dog shit, because they're not. Overall, these special effects look pretty good, but compared to other MCU movies that came out before this one, there are a few shots that are a bit rushed and seem like they were made on a Friday afternoon. And I know that there's been worse effects in other movies that I've said looked pretty good, but this is an MCU movie. It cost over $200 million. There is no excuse for anything to look off here, especially as something as simple as a car flipping over. And as I said, it's not like rampant through the film, but there is more than one shot that is a bit suspect. Overall though, while there are a few lacking shots that stick out like sore thumbs, for an MCU movie or not, these effects are overall pretty good. This movie reminded me a lot of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not necessarily in like story and tone and all that, but in just the way that I felt about it. It wasn't a bad movie. I mean, I was pretty entertained for the vast majority of its runtime, but it just didn't leave much of a mark. It was just kind of a fine movie. I had fun while watching it, but I'm not really gonna think about it much at all after I'm done with it. And that's how it was with Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not a bad movie, but afterwards it's just kind of like, alright, fine, that was whatever, didn't really mean much. And admittedly, I probably had just a bit more fun with that movie over this one. So far, with this movie and the Marvel Disney Plus TV shows that we've gotten, are not filling me with a ton of confidence concerning the MCU moving forward. I don't think it's like a dumpster fire waiting to happen or anything, but I don't have anywhere near the excitement that I had in previous phases. The MCU feels a bit directionless right now. It seems like they don't know what exactly to do next. That, the trailers of the upcoming movies, and some of the things that I've heard that they will be doing or want to do with the MCU moving forward don't really fill me with a lot of excitement. I do have some concerns, but this year we're supposed to get quite a few MCU movies, so maybe they'll get back on track at some point later in the year. Guys, overall, Black Widow was an entertaining movie and it was okay. Is it one of the best or even one of the better MCU movies out there? No, it's not. It's somewhere in the middle. It is absolutely watchable and you will be entertained while watching it. However, you'll forget about it just as quick. The story is just kind of run-of-the-mill and okay, and the villain is a bit lackluster. But it does have some interesting characters for Black Widow's family and some really good performances from everybody. The family aspects of this film are absolutely the best parts and make it what it is. I do wish that Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow had gone out on a bit more of a high note, but as it stands, Black Widow is absolutely worth streaming.
Across the street.
Now I know MCU diehards, the ones that pretty much like anything MCU releases, will love this movie. They're gonna say that I'm crazy for even saying that. They're just gonna eat this all up. And hey, that's fine, whatever, you do you. But everybody else, just know that I don't think you should run out and see this one right away. But as soon as it's available on streaming, it's totally worth checking out. So if you're looking for a fun enough action movie for the night, then check out Black Widow, and I think you'll have a pretty good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of Black Widow. Finally, if you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Budapest.
One thing's for sure. I'm done running from my past.
So, while the Black Widow movie should have been, at least in my opinion, it should have been the first female-led solo Marvel movie, instead of giving the fans what they really wanted, which would have been a Black Widow movie like 8 years ago, we got Captain Marvel first instead. And that turned out, well, it turned out like that. These two movies will inevitably be compared because they are both the only two female-led solo Marvel movies. And that being said, I can say 100% without a doubt, regardless of what I said about this film in the review, it is absolutely better than that movie. Come at me, Marvel stans. My comment section awaits.